what they're going to end up doing is creating this like permission slip for a guest to have you on, right? And I call it a permission slip because instead of calling it a one pager or whatever, this is what you want to be thinking, right? When you are reaching out or someone is reaching out for you, you want to make it as easy and as attractive as possible for that guest to have you on. So of course, the one pager that describes accomplishments and whatnot, most one pagers I see are very guest focused. When we produce these one pagers, again, we focus on the POV, right? This idea of let's evangelize a mission because this mission and this world is messed up for this reason. And here's an idea for how to fix it. And this is what it can look like. And therefore, this person is a good idea because they have this list of experiences, right? We flip that on its head. So everything that you're doing when you're reaching out with this permission slip, whatever you're putting together, we do it POV focused. What we like to do is create the POV, shoot an episode about the POV, right? So have this conversation where if you don't have your own podcast, you can just have someone come on and just have a conversation with them where they're asking you, all right, so what's the world like right now? Oh, okay. Well, what's the problem with that? Cool. You're talking through it. What are the ramifications? Talk through the ramifications. Talk about like the big idea of how you can solve this. And if we solve it, what it can look like. And then just kind of go back and forth talking about, okay, so if we can solve it with that, what's needed? Boom, 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 boom. Your best piece of advice on what's needed. Some of that is your own product. Other things is what's the ecosystem around it, right? Like what are the things that need to happen? And what can the future world really, really look like? I'll give you an example. For Finance for Physicians, who we keep talking about, Daniel Wren, we are aiming to get him on other doctor-related podcasts, right? So instead of pitching him as a financial advisor for physicians, what we have figured out is we've gotten really crystal clear on his POV. His POV is that right now, the healthcare system does not have the best interest in mind of doctors. It is a system that does not allow them to do what's best for the patient. What they force them to do is jump through a whole bunch of hoops because insurance is driving the bus, or healthcare systems that are trying to squeeze the juice out of them, right? Like insurance is telling them what procedures they can do. The healthcare executive is telling them they can only spend a certain amount of time with patients. So they're not being incentivized to keep people healthy. Instead, they're just being incentivized to treat people and treat them over and over again. And that leads to this world where we're all getting sick. Doctors are burning out. They hate their job. So they spend their time looking for side hustles and looking for ways to retire early. But doctors don't want to retire early. What they want to do is help people, right? And what Daniel sees as the solution, the big idea, is entrepreneurship for physicians. And specifically, when doctors go to this direct care model, right? This model where the patient is paying the doctor directly. It can be done a bunch of different ways, but what that does is cut out the system. And what that does is incentivize the doctor to do what's best for the patient, right? So, and once we had that conversation, we then talked about, okay, so what do we need to get there? Well, number one, they need to see that it's not weird. If they can like see other doctors that have done it, because the moment that they say that they're going to do this model, everyone around them is going to freak out because they've been trained to just do this one way, right? What else do they need? Well, their big fear is that once they make this leap, where's the next dollar going to come from? They're used to being employees. They're not used to being entrepreneurs. So they need to like understand the financial risk, and then they need a way to get there, right? And then that's where Daniel's expertise really comes in, but it's all packaged around this idea that there's this like better way for doctors to love their career, right? So we had that episode, we recorded it. Now we can make a one page based around that POV. And with that one pager, we are creating an email that's reaching out to somebody based on that. We're going to talk about that email format where we have an episode that we're tying into. Hey man, if you want to listen to this thing long form, this is what I believe on this thing. It has that validation of like, this isn't, like they really believe this. They've put their name out on this already. Create a sizzle reel that like summarizes that thing. So like somebody can just watch the 2-minute version of it or not. And then in that one pager, what it talks about is all these different things that he can talk about that's supported by an example of him already talking about it, right? So that's the permission slip that we like to design. It's a full package of the one pager with a picture, the problem, right? Like that POV statement, what we know, how they've developed it. the amount of downloads that he has on his podcast, which if you don't have a podcast, you can just talk about your email list or your reach online, right? Like this ability of like who else you're going to share that person's podcast with is a big part of it. And then, a couple sample questions that they can ask you, right? So just like really, really reducing the friction out of why would I have them on? Oh, because there's a problem in the world. What am I going to ask him about? Oh, these different things. I've already seen him talk about it. I can dig in a little further here, or I can just have a similar conversation, right? Reduce friction when you're reaching out to them. That's the best thing that you can do to make it really, really easy. And you want to have that package ready when you're reaching out to people that you don't know yet. With Daniel specifically, having your own podcast strategy really helps because what we did is interviewed a bunch of physicians that have podcasts on his show last quarter. And now with this like permission slip that we have, the first people we're starting with is like, oh, hey, listen, you were on our show last quarter. We think that there is this problem in the ecosystem. Do you agree? We created this one pager in this episode about it. Let me know if you want to chat, right? So that really makes it very, very easy for people to get on. All right. So now when you are pitching yourself and you're writing an email on this, I get a lot of these. Like I said, I'm gonna share kind of like what it normally looks like when I see this stuff, so that you get a sense for what not to do. But it's very I-centric, right? Oh man, I just erased it. I don't want to put this person on blast. I had it kind of like figured out, but it's very much like, I heard that you have this podcast. Whether it's them reaching out themselves, I'd love to be on because I'm this person and this and that. Like everything that we do, that we preach here, start with the word you when you're reaching out. Talk about in the perspective of what's good for the podcaster themselves and what's good for their audience. So this is a template that I'm going to share with everybody at the end of this that has a couple of things, right? It has you writing out where to put your mission and your hook points and alternate hook points, but it also has a sample script. And I'm going to read it through here, right? So subject line, love the show with past guests. That's something that a lot of people use, right? That just shows that you listen to the show. If I know that I'm getting an email from a fan, I'm prone to open it, right? So like start with your episode with guest name about main topic, right? What it was brilliant, right? We get this a lot too, right? Like, hey, heard your podcast about XYZ, but then it's not followed up with a specific insight, right? So let them know that you actually listened will actually get them to continue reading the email, right? You phrase this thing of guest name about this topic, the part where you discuss this one thing and you give this specific insight and you talk about it. I've never seen it from that perspective. Thanks. Then notice what I do here. Feel free to use that paragraph as a testimonial for your show or your guest. You're adding value there to the equation. If you're reaching out with this intent of like, I've given you value, here's a testimonial for you, people are likely to buy in on you. Another thing that you can do is, well, we'll talk about that later. Then, speaking of unique perspectives, do you think your listeners would care about boom, mission, POV, right? Like at that point, that's like, do you think that they care about this problem? Again, you're still speaking in ways of them. And here's the first I, hook point, accomplished XYZ that proves that you know what to do about this thing and would love to share everything I learned doing it with your audience. You can hear, see, watch me here, talk about it here, right? Like, so this is clicking in with either a past podcast episode you've been on or a blog post you've written about it or your own podcasting that you did or hyperlink it to a keynote. And you can check me out here. And then that's where you send them your media kit. You attach that. It would be an honor to add value to your audience. Are you interested in a chat? P.S. I've already subscribed to your show and left a 5-star review. Is there anything I can do to help? Right? A little bit more value is a really, really good way of reaching out to people in a way that isn't asking for, right? Like there's one ask in there and like 3 offers. So you are much more likely to gain someone's favor that way that don't know you by doing that. And that's, better chance of landing on a show, better than anything that I normally get, for the record. So I'm going to share that later and you can steal that template for reaching out yourself. And then notice one of the thing that's most likely to get your email opened, right? This ask that you have is the headline. Some of the big problems that people have with headlines is that they're generally like, I'll get a headline that's like, this person's name or this title at this company wants to be on your show. That doesn't tell me anything, right? Giving me a headline that's about you doesn't really make me want to open it. I generally skip that. I get a bajillion emails a day, right? So a headline that is, again, about the POV, right? About like, hey, do you think there's a problem with doctors burning out? Right? If they believe that, they're more likely to open it, right? Like, or a reason doctors are burning out that nobody talks about, or like a way out of burnout for doctors. But like, that's going to get that person that really, really cares to open it. The other one is that whole, like, I'm a fan of your show one, right? Like your episode on blah, blah, blah was great. That'll generally get an open. If you're going to use that, have listened to the episode, right? Like, it's really, really easy for the podcaster to understand that you just went and looked up like a title and a guest and sent it to them. And at that point, I think you're lying to me, right? So like, if you're going to use a specific episode, make sure that you have that headline in there. Past podcasting guest, booking agent, Spencer Carpenter, that was on the show prior. He says that using an emoji in the headline increases his open rates as well. So I've never really done that, but like, if you can use an emoji in there, but at the end of the day, what you really, really want to lead with is a hook point, right? Like that, something that's a lesson, something that's a problem, something that can really, really speak to that audience, or something really genuine observation that you've done, that'll get it open. And then you want to think about multiple of these hook points, right? Like these things where you're really thinking about what you can teach, and based on what experience you have, think about multiples of those, because you can craft 2 to 3 different emails that hit at different angles based on the problem that you're trying to solve and the thing that you can teach. So doing up to 3 of these, I think, is kosher, right? Like you can make 3 of these on outreach. If you don't hear back from a podcaster in 3 emails, stop bothering them. They're probably just not going to take your thing, or find a different angle to get in there, right? Like go connect with them on social and start like doing it that way, because they've tuned out your emails, right? But like, you really want to think of these, like, what's your main hook point, right? Like my main hook point is the idea that I created a $40 million community, year 1, through a podcast. That gets me in a lot of doors of community, of podcasting circles, of marketing, stuff like that. But then underneath that hook point, I have the idea, like quickest way to build a community, how to build a community that is actually profitable day one, stuff like that, right? Like different hook points of things that I learned from the experiences that we've had at Be The Stage, how to mitigate marketing risk, those kinds of things. Those are all the hook points that we use for ourselves. Again, you have a main one, and then you got a couple under that, right? So now you have done the reach out.